you can.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Yay,
Welcome to In Training for Peachtree. Tonight we have Alissa Palladino giving us a great presentation about nutrition and hydration to get us ready to go into the summer. So Alissa, all you.
All right, great. Well, thanks for your patience, everyone, and I hope those who were on the call earlier got some good answers to their questions. So my name is Alissa Palladino. I think there's probably a lot of people on the call tonight who I've either met in person or I've connected with at running events in the past, but I am a registered dietitian. I'm also a fellow runner, and I am really, really passionate about the role that our food choices plays in our overall health, as well as our training and our performance. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you tonight. And we'll be talking about some nutrition fundamentals, as well as applying nutrition to the context of running. Okay, so here's our agenda. It's fairly aggressive. And I just want to let you know, I can no longer see the chat. So if I think I'll probably try to pause after each section. And if you want to ask the question, unmute yourself, or I guess maybe Amy can monitor the chat, or someone can monitor the chat for me, because I can't see it now that I've my slides presented. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about macronutrients and food sources, talk about some general healthy eating guidelines. We'll discuss fueling before, during, and after running, hydration, weight management, and then some other nutrition considerations for running, time permitting. So macronutrients, this term, some of you may have heard this term. What are they? Macronutrients provide energy, or calories, and we need them in relatively large amounts, hence the term macros. There are three types: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. All three are essential, meaning they must be obtained through diet. We can't make these ourselves within our bodies, and we require a balance of all three macronutrients each day for optimal health and functioning. So let's go through each of them, starting with carbohydrates, which I know have gotten kind of a bad rep, even among the running community recently, with all the low carb diets and keto diets getting so popular. But carbohydrates really are important for a number of reasons. They are quick, easy energy. They are the primary fuel for our brains, and they are the primary fuel for our working muscles during exercise, including running, especially at longer durations and higher intensity exercise. So we'll circle back to carbohydrates when we get into fueling for running. Eating carbohydrates directly impacts our blood glucose, which is not a negative thing. That actually is the process that needs to happen for us to get energy from carbohydrates. For health, we want to focus primarily on our fiber-rich carbohydrates, although the guidance is going to be a little bit differently when we get into using carbs as fuel for running. And again, for general health, we want to limit our sweetened beverages, pastry, sugary cereals, candy, cookies, refined grains. So all foods in moderation, but when it comes to health, the more fiber-rich carbs are going to be more beneficial. And there's lots of great, really nutrient-rich carbohydrates. So whole grains, whole wheat bread, and pita and wraps, pasta, including whole wheat pasta, or recently I've been super into like the bean pasta, the banza, or rice pasta if you need to be gluten-free. Fruit is an excellent source of healthy carbs. Starchy vegetables, same thing. So potatoes, peas, and corn, beans, lentils, and legumes, oatmeal, and cereal. So lots of very nutritious carb-rich foods. Our next macronutrient is protein. Protein is important for tissue growth and repair, maintaining our lean muscle, and increasing our satiety, so helping us feel more satisfied and less hungry in between meals. For cardiovascular health, we do want to focus primarily on our leaner animal sources of protein, as well as incorporating plant-based sources of protein. And we want to spread our protein intake out, really distributing it across the day. So really every meal and every snack, every few hours should have a good protein source. That's how we're best going to use its building blocks, amino acids, for us to repair our muscles and our tissues. And that includes the post-workout, the post-run window, which we'll get to later. So some protein food sources, you can see it's found both in animal foods and plant foods. So red meat, poultry, fish and seafood, eggs, which we talked about a bit earlier for those who were on the call before, Dairy is a great source of protein, especially Greek yogurt. And then some of our plant sources are going to be our beans, lentils, and legumes, soy, including tofu and tempeh, and then our nuts and our seeds. And you'll notice that the beans, lentils, and legumes were also on the carbohydrate list. And that's because a lot of foods, including those, they provide more than one macronutrient. So those foods are great sources of carbs, and they're also great plant sources of protein. And then finally, dietary fat. So here's a good point to clarify. Body fat is not the same as dietary fat. So basically, we need both. Body fat it serves purposes, right? I mean, we know too, having excess body fat can increase risk for chronic disease, but it does play important roles. It's insulation, it's protecting our organs, it's a stored fuel source. We need it for healthy hormone levels, and that's true for both men and women. So there's, downsides of being too lean and not having enough body fat. And then dietary fat is different. That's, the fat that's found in our foods. And that's going to give us flavor, which we need. We need to enjoy our food for sure. It's going to help with satiety, so helping us feel more satisfied by our meals. And it's going to help with nutrient absorption. So there's 4 vitamins, A, D, E, and K, that are fat soluble. So we absorb them better if we are eating them with fat in food. For example, maybe having a green salad and you pair it with an olive oil-based dressing, you're going to absorb the vitamin K better than if you had a fat-free dressing. For heart health, we want to focus primarily on our unsaturated plant-based fats while limiting our saturated fat and trans fat. And that goes back to what we were talking about with LDL cholesterol levels. And here's some of our healthier food sources of fat. Nuts are a really great source. Nut butters. Seeds, so like your chia, your flax, your pumpkin, your sunflower seeds, avocado, olives, olive oil, and then kind of the exception to the plant versus animal fat rule. Fatty fish like salmon and tuna and mackerel are really good sources of a healthy kind of fat called omega-3s. So we definitely want to incorporate those. And then I include cheese and full-fat dairy on the healthier fat list, just because there are other nutrient benefits you're getting from dairy. Like protein, like calcium, like vitamin A, potassium. And again, you'll notice that the nuts and the nut butters, they were also on the protein list, right? So again, an example of a food that provides more than one macronutrient. So nuts and nut butters are going to give us fat, and they're going to give us plant protein. And then I just wanted to touch on micronutrients. So this is just a fancy term for vitamins and minerals. We need them in much smaller amounts compared to macronutrients. They do not provide energy, so they don't give us calories, although they do play a role in how we get calories or energy from macronutrients. And they're essential for so many different aspects of health, producing energy, like I mentioned, metabolism, performing in exercise, recovery. Really the best way, and again, this goes back to a question that was asked earlier, the best way to get our vitamins and minerals is through a balanced diet, through eating the rainbow, eating, a variety of foods from a variety of food groups. But if you do follow a restricted diet for whatever reason, a health condition, a personal preference, you might require supplementation of certain micronutrients. We'll talk a little bit about iron and calcium later, but for somebody on a vegan diet, it can be really hard to get enough B12. So that might be one you need to supplement. Calcium too, if you're avoiding dairy. And vitamin D in the winter, we talked about that earlier too, but that's primarily made on our skin with sun exposure. It's not that widely found in the food system. So especially in the winter months, you might need to supplement vitamin D. Okay. So any questions so far? And again, I can't see the chat, so feel free to chime in. Okay, I'm gonna move right along. Okay, so we're gonna go through some healthy eating guidelines. And like I said earlier, I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all approach to nutrition. So everybody's lived experience is different. But nutrition is a science, and there are some, fundamentals that we can all kind of use to really like fuel optimally for health and performance. So we're going to talk about what, when, and how much. And I'm all about balance. So we're going to talk about building balanced meals, and that really starts on your plate. So the balanced plate approach really works in any setting and is totally like just a customizable template that you can then build wherever you find yourself eating and whatever your particular dietary style or preferences are. I'm not going to go very specifically into portions recommended or proportions, really just the components you need, because everybody is so different. And really, there's going to be different portions you need, even based on how far you are into your training. So like a light training day versus a heavy training day, you might need more of something, less of something else. But this is a template to kind of think about balance and making sure you're having all 4 components. So the building blocks of a balanced meal, I want to check these off each time you sit down to a meal. You want to have veggies, really. So this is going to be like the foundation of a healthy diet. You're going to get volume, you're going to get dietary fiber, you're going to get those micronutrients, which are your vitamins and minerals, and then you're going to get your antioxidants. We'll talk about those a bit later. But veggies are really the foundation there. No surprise that your dietitian is talking to you about veggies. Then you want to make sure you have some sort of complex carbohydrate. And again, going back to that list, what are some nutritious forms of carbohydrate? And that's going to give us energy. And depending on the choice we choose, fiber for heart health, for digestion, for cancer prevention, all that. We do want to have a lean protein source to manage recovery. So make sure we have amino acids to repair and build our muscles. It's going to help us manage hunger, feel more satisfied, and keep our metabolism revved. And then a healthy fat source, which is going to give us that satiety factor, increase nutrient absorption, and then add flavor to our meals. So all those 4 components, you want to make sure, okay, check, check, check. Do I have that? Okay, I have a balanced meal. Breakfast, a little bit different. If you want to throw some veggies in your omelet, or you want to like make your oatmeal with zucchini, go for it. But at the minimum, make sure you have carbs, fat, and protein. So that's sort of like a slightly different template for breakfast. Although, I don't know, some people like non-breakfasty foods in the morning. And if that's the case for you, try to get your veggies in. Like if you're eating leftovers. And then snacks. So, snacking is actually especially for athletes, but really for all human beings. Snacks can be a great way to add nutrition to your day and also kind of help ensure that you're eating on a consistent basis, that you're not going too long between your eating occasions. So when you think about a balanced snack, think about pairing some kind of complex carbohydrate. And I'll give you some examples later, but let's say some whole grain crackers or a piece of fruit with either a lean protein and or a healthy fat. That combo is going to keep you a lot more satisfied than just one of these. So like an apple and a string cheese is going to keep you a lot more satisfied than just an apple or just a string cheese. A banana with peanut butter is going to keep you a lot more satisfied than just a banana, just peanut butter. Exception would be immediately before running, which we will get to later. So some balanced breakfast ideas. I'm actually not going to read through all these just for the sake of time, and also because I'm going to be sending these slides after the fact, but I basically wanted to help translate this template into some real food ideas, right? So just as an example, like the eggs cooked with whole grain toasted potatoes, the eggs are going to give you protein and a little bit of fat, and then the whole grain toasted potatoes are going to give you those complex carbs. Same thing with lunch. So basically translating that template of veggies, carbs, protein, fat into actual food that you might want to eat at lunchtime. So as your example, we'll just kind of go with the first one, a sandwich, great kind of template for building a balanced meal. Your turkey or your other deli meat would be your protein source. The whole grain bread or the sub or the wrap would be your carbohydrate. The lettuce and the tomato would be your vegetable. And then the cheese, the hummus, or the guac would be your healthy fat. Easy peasy. And then dinner, same thing. Again, translating that template into some meal ideas and just kind of going with the first one. If you do a stir fry, the mixed vegetables would be your vegetables, the brown rice, the quinoa would be your carbohydrate, and then the chicken, the shrimp, or the tofu would be your protein. And then however you're cooking it, if you're using some olive oil or some peanut oil to cook it, that would be your healthy fat. And some balanced snack ideas. So kind of going with that concept of a carbohydrate-rich food paired with a protein and or a fat, and just going with that top example again, the apple would be your complex carbohydrate, and then the almond butter would be giving you some protein and fat. Timing. So we talked about what, now we're going to talk about when. All right, so when you eat is nearly as important as what you eat. Ideally every 3 to 4 hours, and nobody, everybody's different. You might find that 3 squares work great for you, 3 square meals. You may find that eating smaller, more frequent meals works best for you. You may find 3 medium-sized meals and 1 or 2 snacks works great. but we don't want to go too long between meals. We don't want to let blood sugar drop too far. We don't want to get hangry, because when we are kind of being proactive and preempting that hangry state, we're much more likely to make food choices that kind of align with our best intentions and our goals. So we really want to plan ahead and kind of look through our day and think about, from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, like, what am I doing? Where am I? When do I need to plan meals and snacks? This is really helpful for just timing it this way is really helpful to limit the kind of impulse convenience choices, right? And you definitely want to consider the timing of your run, your other exercise, when you're thinking about your meals and snacks. Make sure you're going in fueled and you have a recovery meal or snack. And then finally, how much, right? So what, when, how much? Portion sizes. How much we eat matters too, right? So just to kind of clarify the difference between a serving and a portion. A serving is the amount of food that's used in consumer education materials, right? So what you're going to see on like a food label, because it needs to list the amount of nutrients or nutrition that's in a standard serving, right? But what you actually eat is your portion, and that could be less than the serving size, or it could be more than the serving size. And that's fine. You know, everybody needs different amounts. There's nothing to really, you could use the serving size as a guideline, but if you need less, you need more, that's cool too. If you're trying to eyeball portion sizes, so you don't, want to grab your food scale or your measuring cups every time you're sitting down to eat, I love just using your hand. You always have your hand every time you're eating, right? So the palm of the hand would be kind of a good way to visualize a 3 to 4 ounce protein serving. So like your chicken or your fish or your meat. Then again, you might need twice that amount of protein at a meal, but just know that the palm size is about the 3 to 4 ounce serving. The fist is about a cup. So maybe you're trying to have a cup of a whole grain, or like a pasta or a rice, or maybe you're trying to have a cup of fruit, like chopped melon or berries. The front of the fist, so like the front half of the fist, would be like a half a cup. So maybe that's going to be your serving for dry oatmeal, or I don't know, something else like raisins and nuts. But just know that if you're trying to get half a cup of something, the front half of the fist is a good way to eyeball. The tip of the thumb would be about a tablespoon. So maybe, your peanut butter or something is going to be a tablespoon. And then the tip of your finger, of your pointer finger, is a teaspoon. So maybe if you're doing like a less healthy fat source like butter or mayo, you want to use a teaspoon. So yeah, you can always use your hand as a guideline. You can also kind of compare common objects. Some of these are so antiquated that are like funny, but like the baseball is about a cup size, a light bulb's about half a cup size. A golf ball is a good way to visualize an ounce or 2 tablespoons, which is great for like peanut butter or cheese. 1 tablespoon being a poker chip, a slice of bread, a cassette tape. It's really hard to find bread these days that's that slice. But again, that kind of goes back to what's one serving versus one portion. Like, what do you actually want to be eating in any given time? Yeah, so like the deck of cards is kind of a classic for a 3 ounce protein portion, but again, you might need 2 decks of cards. 3 ounce fish would be about a checkbook size. For deli meat, an ounce of deli meat would be about a CD. The hockey puck would be the size of a 3 ounce muffin or biscuit, which is sort of similar. Like if you're making a muffin at home in the oven in your muffin tin, maybe you'll get one that size. Probably like 3 or 4 hockey pucks worth if you're getting a muffin at like, a breakfast chain these days. And then if you want to picture 1.5 ounces of cheese, 3 dice. Okay, so we talked about balanced meals, what, when, how much. Next section, we'll dive into fueling for running. But before we do, let's take a break and see if anyone has any questions.
So Alyssa, one of the questions that came up in the chat is what should you be eating if you're trying to make sure you're fueling correctly, but also trying to lose weight?
Yeah, I saw that chat right before we got started. And I do have a section, we'll be talking about that later on, weight management. I think it's a really good, question, and I'm sure it's a topic that a lot of people are concerned about. We will get to it, I promise. Thanks, Crystal. Okay. All right, so let's get into fueling for running. So let's talk about what to eat before, during, and after our runs to really optimize training and, get as much out of it as possible. All right, so the first step is understanding how carbohydrates work as fuel. So we talked about the first slide, the beginning of the presentation. Carbs are the preferred energy source for our brains and our working muscles. So this is how it works. We eat a carbohydrate-rich food, maybe it's a banana, that gets digested and absorbed into our bloodstream as sugar or glucose. So our blood glucose rises. And then our muscles and our brain uses that glucose for energy. And that extra glucose, if we don't need the energy right at the time, will get stored as glycogen. So stored carb in our muscles and our liver. So basically the key thing here is we eat a carb, blood sugar rises, we use it for energy, or we store it for energy later on. So when we eat carbohydrates around running, and we're eating enough carbohydrates in our diet that we have some stored glycogen, we're going to have better energy. We're going to have better endurance. We're going to delay fatigue. So we're going to be able to keep running longer, spare muscle protein. So we want to use carbs and to a certain extent fat for energy. We don't want to break down our muscle and use protein for energy. It helps maintain our blood glucose so we don't get all like foggy brained as we're running. And carbohydrates are the only fuel for high intensity exercise. So anaerobic exercise. I don't know if any of y'all are doing like HIIT workouts. Certainly if you're following Amy's training plan, you're doing speed work, right? When you are going all out, you are only burning carbs for fuel. So if you aren't fueling your body with adequate carbs, you're not really going to get as much out of the speed sessions. You're not going to be able to really work to your capacity and improve your fitness level. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty of what to eat before a run. So we're keeping in mind that carbohydrates are the preferred fuel for exercise. We definitely want to make sure that we are well fueled, including well fueled with carbohydrates. So we have usable energy during that run. Now, when we talked about carbohydrates as far as general health earlier in the presentation, we talked about like fiber-rich carbs, right? Like our beans and our whole grains. But right before running, if we are somehow like finding ourselves with an hour to go, certainly if we're finding ourselves with 30 minutes to go, the simpler the better. We want to go with our more quick digesting carbs and limit fiber because fiber is going to potentially cause some GI distress. So you don't want to be eating beans. You don't even necessarily want to be eating whole grains right before a run. So really the ideal pre-run meal or snack should be like focused on carbs, but lower fiber carbs, low fat, because again, that's going to potentially cause some GI distress, moderate protein, depending on how much time you have and your tolerance. So if you've got like 2 or 3 hours until you're going to run, it's okay to have a little bit of protein or even a moderate amount of protein with that meal or snack. But if you've got an hour or less, then you just want to go with simple carbs. And that can even be liquid if you find yourself having like a really sensitive stomach or you're running first thing in the morning and you just cannot tolerate solid food. So some pre-run snack ideas. I actually have some of my favorites to show y'all. So fruit's always a great option if you can tolerate it, because then you're going to get lots of other nutrients too, including like potassium, vitamin C, like a lot of good stuff. Oatmeal if you're running first thing in the morning, dry cereal, but go with a simple dry cereal, not like your fiber one, right? Because again, the fiber. Toast, English muffin, bagel, maybe like something really simple like pretzels, graham crackers with saltines. You can do a grain-based granola bar like your Cliff Bar. This is very high in carbohydrates and only moderate in protein, so perfect for before a workout. Frozen waffles, a fig bar or like a fruit leather, dried fruit. So raisins are great, or like dried apricots I've been really into recently. Sensitive stomachs, applesauce or pureed fruit. And then sometimes, especially if you really don't have a lot of time or it's before a race, you could go with a sports product, a gel, or a shot block, right? So really just like quick carbs, very simple, no fiber, no fat, no protein. And then again, liquid options would be like your Powerade, maybe even just some juice, or something like a UCAN. During running, so as we kind of increase our mileage towards Peachtree, if we find ourselves out there for greater than an hour, and not like 61 minutes, but like, 70 minutes, 75 minutes, 90 minutes, we actually need to refuel with carbohydrates on the run to extend our endurance, to be able to keep running, to make sure we have enough glucose in our blood, and to make sure we're not breaking down muscle. When you hear about marathon runners, and I know we're training for Peachtree right now, when you hear about marathon runners hitting the wall, they've run out of carbohydrates. So we got to make sure we're fueling, and really starting at that 45-minute mark, just to make sure there's some kind of preempt the need, and it takes a little bit of time to absorb and then use the carbs. So the standard recommendation is 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, up to 90 grams of carbs per hour if you're going for a very, very long distance, not really applicable here. So I would just kind of start, especially if you're new for fueling on the run, start with that 30 grams. And just for reference, like most sports products, one serving will give you like 25-ish grams. So if you're doing that, and then some of your fluid is also like a Powerade and giving you some carbs, you're actually probably hitting the mark. And actually, if you really look at the nutrition label on your sports products, you're maybe going to freak out because it's all sugar. But that's, during exercise, nutrition guidelines are different than they are for everyday life. Sugar is the simplest form of carb. So when you're looking for the quickest source of energy, that's what you need. And whether you want to do it with a sports product, or you want to carry some dried fruit on you, or you want to carry pretzels on you, that's fine. You can even carry like licorice or Swedish fish. But you do want to give your body that sugar, the simplest form of carbs, so you can keep running. And it can totally come from the beverage as well. Okay, so after running, this is where our recovery nutrition comes in. Post-workout nutrition is essential to optimizing recovery. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, summer versus winter, does nutrition change? The biggest thing that I see with my clients and myself is like a lack of appetite after a hot summer run. So sometimes it's challenging to really get to refuel in that 1 hour window that we know we should be doing. But when we refuel in that window, we recover better than if we delay it. So we're gonna get like, we gotta get carbs to our muscle to restore all our glycogen that we depleted. So remember, glycogen is the carbohydrate that's stored in our muscles. Protein, so those amino acid building blocks to start repairing all those micro tears. Hydration, so fluids, we'll get to in a sec. But yeah, if we refuel in that 1 hour window, we recover better than if we wait, and it may help manage hunger later on in the day. I can't give you specific guidelines about how much. It really depends on like what you ate before your run, what time of day your run was, how long it was. But like, if you're kind of looking for basic guidelines, like trying to get at least 10 grams of protein, maybe up to 30, and just a good source of carbohydrates in there too. If your post-workout window corresponds to a meal time, you don't necessarily have to like down a shake or eat a bar. Just have your meal. So like if you've gone for a run in the morning, just make sure your breakfast has some kind of carbohydrate and some kind of protein. So like your oatmeal, carbohydrate, eggs or Greek yogurt, protein. If you run at lunch, maybe make sure your lunch has protein and carbs. So a turkey or tuna sandwich would hit the bill. And if you're running in the evening after work, just make sure you have dinner within an hour, such as the stir fry example we talked about earlier. But if because of the timing of your workout or the timing of your meal, you know it's going to be longer than an hour until you have a chance to eat. A lot of times that happens with runners that work out in the evening, and then they have to like still drive home and make dinner and shower and take care of the family. Then a post-workout snack is really important. So just some ideas for a post-run snack, and some of these will appeal even in the summer when it's hot. Greek yogurt with berries, cottage cheese with fruit, an apple with a string cheese or a hard-boiled egg, mini pita filled with turkey slices, whole grain crackers topped with tuna, a protein bar or shake. So maybe instead of going with the Cliff classic bar, you go with the Cliff Builders bar, or you go with the Cliff their whey protein line. Chocolate milk, especially the Fairlife brand, is really high, both great source of carbs and protein and hydration. Or you can make a smoothie with fruit plus either yogurt or protein powder. And then I just put together a little, this is one of my go-to smoothies here. It could be a great breakfast, definitely a good post-workout because it's got protein from the yogurt or the protein powder. It's got fluids, and there's some additional nutrients if you use regular milk, and then some good carbs and micronutrients from the berries and the banana, and then bonus points if you want to throw in some greens. And this recipe doesn't have a fat source. So post-workout, you don't really need a fat source. It actually can delay the absorption of the carbs and the protein. But if this was trying to be like a balanced meal, like a full breakfast, you might want to throw in some peanut butter or some avocado or some chia seeds. Okay, our next section, we're going to get into hydration, both for life and for running in the humidity. So does anybody have any questions about fueling for running before we get into this next section? I guess the biggest thing I would say is practice, because you never know like how your body is going to respond eating on the run or eating before a run. And individual, it's so individual. How long you need, what you can tolerate. So definitely practice whatever you plan to have on race day. You know, practice that on your training runs and kind of figure out what works. And once you know what works, stick with it. Okay, hydration. So hydration is probably as important, if not more important than nutrition. And that's true for both runners and just for human beings. So it's essential for life. Water is essential for life. Our body is 50% or more water, and it helps regulate our body temperature. We need it for all the energy reactions that and metabolism that's going on in our body. So we can't like break down macronutrients for fuel without water. And we need it to maintain appropriate electrolyte balance in our blood. So not too low or too high sodium, potassium. The key is going to be staying on top of your hydration during everyday life. And this is something that people really struggle with. And during the pandemic, when more people are working from home, I've heard so many people say they're struggling even more than usual, remembering to drink. Feeling thirsty is actually a late sign of dehydration. You probably have heard that thirst can masquerade as hunger. So don't go ahead and wait until you're thirsty to drink water. Make a plan to be drinking frequently. As a baseline recommendation, most adults need 8-ounce glasses, so like 64 ounces of fluid, plus replenishing the fluids that you lose during a run. So if you weigh yourself before and after running and you realize that you've lost 2 pounds on the scale, there's 16 ounces in a pound. That's 32 ounces of fluid, or basically a liter of fluid that you're going to want to replenish. And you're going to want to replenish it as quickly as possible. So some tips to stay on top of your hydration. And I guess from a general health standpoint, we want to stick mainly to water and other beverages that are naturally sugar-free. We don't want to be drinking lots of sugar throughout the day through our beverages, with the exception of during running, where the sugar is a carb, so it's helpful. Know that depending on your food choices, you might be getting some fluid from your foods. So fruits, vegetables, tea, coffee, soup, dairy, these all count towards fluid, with the exception of alcohol. Alcohol, you've probably heard, is a diuretic, which just means that we lose more fluid by drinking alcohol. We actually need to increase our fluid consumption. So like every glass of wine you drink, plan on having a glass of water. If you find plain water is boring, try adding some lemons or some frozen fruit, or even just a splash of juice. So you can give yourself a little bit of flavor without a ton of added sugar. Also, sparkling water is great, whether you want to have a LaCroix or like a soda stream. There's nothing wrong with sparkling as far as how it affects your fluid. Definitely recommend investing in a reusable water bottle, and then based on the size of it, set some goals for how often to refill it. So if you have a liter bottle, like a 32-ounce bottle, I'll often set a goal for people to try to consume 1 before lunch and then 1 before dinner. So refilling it twice during the day. And you might even want to set a reminder app or set the timer on your phone every 30 minutes or every hour. It's just a reminder to sip it so that you're not like guzzling that last liter because right before the timer is set to go off or whatever. And then really monitoring your urine color and outputs is a great way to just say like, okay, yeah, I'm well hydrated. Like if it's a nice light lemonade color, doesn't have to be completely clear. But if it's looking more like iced tea compared to lemonade, that's definitely a sign that you want to step up your fluids. And if you're just not going a lot, that's a sign too. You want to be kind of going regularly throughout the day. Now, hydrating for running, the biggest thing here is starting hydrated. So going back to like staying hydrated in daily life, you definitely don't want to like find yourself 20 minutes before you're about to head out for a run and trying to guzzle a liter of water because it's going to be sitting in your stomach and you're going to be very uncomfortable. So staying on top of fluid in daily life is key, is the first step to hydrating for running. And think about the 2 to 4 hours before you head out. The recommendation here, and I know this is very technical, is 2 to 4 milliliters per pound of body weight, which translates into 300 to 600 milliliters for a 150-pound person, or 10 to 20 ounces. So I think that's where you you can kind of visualize that. This is like a small bottle, I think is about a 20 ounce. So in the few hours before you head out, if you weigh approximately 150 pounds, either half of this or up to this, trying to get that fluid in yourself. Then during the run, and I would say now that it's hot and humid here in Georgia, we should be drinking on the run. And we really should be getting used to running with our own hydration. The goal of hydrating on the run is to keep up with sweat losses. That's going to be challenging. You're probably going to end slightly dehydrated, but you want to like prevent as much as that as possible. The other thing to know is that individual sweat rates vary very greatly. And that's not just how much we sweat, but what our sweat is made up of. How much of it, how much sodium, how much potassium are we losing along with that water? Again, the technical recommendation translates into 4 to 6 ounces every 15 minutes. So really, if you just try to take a few sips every 15 minutes or even every 20 minutes, that's going to go a long way to preventing dehydration. So really, again, carry your own bottle, sip frequently. At the very least, plan a route where there's some places you can stop and use a water fountain. I think this is especially important now with COVID. I mean, we're probably most of us running with masks, but if you used to be able to just like pop into a place and buy a bottle of water or a thing of Powerade, for some reason you don't have your mask, you can't go inside. You know, it's better to be prepared, especially now. And then after the run, you want to replace those fluid losses as quickly as possible. Again, to find out just how much, you can weigh yourself before and after and recognize that every pound lost on the scale is 16 ounces worth of fluid. And then continue hydrating throughout the day. So what should I drink? Somebody mentioned the cramps earlier. And so hydration for daily life, we really just want to focus on water. We don't want to be drinking a ton of sugar. We certainly don't need to be drinking a ton of sodium. So water is fine for everyday life, and it's really fine for runs less than 45 minutes, unless for some reason it's like a crazy, crazy hot day. When you need water plus electrolytes plus carbs, that's going to be important for runs that are especially longer than 60 minutes. It's going to be very important on hot, humid runs, and it's going to be very important for salty sweaters. So here's the thing, when we're sweating, we're not just losing water. Our sweat is water, salt, sodium, and then a little bit of some other minerals like potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Sodium is the main thing. So if we're just replenishing water, we're not actually like giving our bodies what it needs. And we can even deplete the sodium concentration in our blood, which is dangerous. So that's why these sports products like our Powerade are designed to have not just water, but also sodium. And because we also need carbs on these longer runs, they also give us sugar. And actually, like the way that the sodium and the glucose channels work, we absorb the glucose better with sodium, we absorb the sodium better with glucose. So there's a science behind those sports drinks. And again, why the coconut water is not actually as effective is that it's primarily potassium as the electrolyte, and what we really need is the sodium. There are tests you can get done that measure your sweat to measure like not only how much you're losing, but like the composition of it. So you can really get very technical about like how much sodium you want to take in. I would just say make sure that on those really hot humid runs, especially for longer than an hour, you're not just doing water, that you're doing something with electrolytes in it as well. And you can like sip on like Noon or other kind of electrolyte beverages throughout the day, but you can also really get a lot of that from food. So a lot of food has sodium in it, even just like bread. Definitely like most packaged and processed food, sodium is a preservative. Potassium is found in like all fruits and vegetables. So if you're eating a balanced diet and drinking water, you're probably okay. And then finally, if you just kind of want water plus electrolytes, but without those carbs, without that sugar, that's when you would do like just dissolve some salt tabs in water or go with the zero version of Powerade or Gatorade. So the zero refers to zero sugar. It doesn't refer to zero sodium. All right. And again, the goal here is to prevent dehydration. Dehydration is very, very dangerous. If you are dehydrated on a run, like if you run out of nutrition on a run, you'll like balk and you'll have to start walking probably. You might pass out, but probably you'll just walk. But dehydration can get very, very dangerous. And it can set in more easily than we think, especially when it's hot and humid. So some of your symptoms would be feeling dizzy, feeling lightheaded, having chills, starting to have some cognitive impairment, like not being able to think clearly, and then having muscle cramps. So, and again, dehydration can be not just the fluid, but also the electrolytes. Technically, the loss of 2% of our body weight is the definition of dehydration. So for an 150-pound person, that would be 3 pounds. So if you go out, before your run and you're 150 pounds, you come back and you're 147 pounds, you've lost 2% of your body weight. You are technically dehydrated. You've got to get those fluids in because dehydration is very serious. You want to be proactive about it. Okay. I think this is going to be our final. Oh no, we have 2 more sections, but I want to just kind of like dive ahead here since we started late and we already had a question about this. I know like weight management, like that's something that's on a lot of people's minds, and it's certainly something that people think about when they're running, when they're runners. Maybe they take up running because they want to lose weight. I can't tell you how many individual clients I see for counseling who come, and it's like, what are your goals? Well, I want to optimize my training. I want to, figure out how to fuel, and I wouldn't mind losing 5 or 10 pounds, right? So a lot of runners are thinking about weight loss. So I wanted to make sure that we, address it and provide some education around it. So, okay, in order to understand weight loss and eating for weight loss, we have to understand calories. Calories are simply a unit of energy. They're not the devil. We actually, of course, need that energy, right, to function and also definitely to train. So when we talk about energy balance, that's when energy in equals energy out. And when that happens, we maintain our weight. We're not gaining weight, we're not losing weight. Anytime we experience a change in our weight, whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's a result of a change in energy balance. So if we are in a calorie surplus or an energy surplus, we're going to experience weight gain, right? So that means energy in is greater than energy out. If we are trying to lose weight or we experience weight loss unintentionally, that's a result from a calorie deficit. So energy in is less than energy out. And actually, any weight loss diet that works, quote unquote works, it does so by putting you in a calorie deficit. Whether you're following a keto diet, intermittent fasting, paleo, Weight Watchers, the diet promotes or fosters weight loss by inducing a calorie deficit. And I know the calories in, calories out thing sounds like kind of overly simplified. So I'm going to delve into that just a little bit more to kind of understand what are calories in and what are calories out. It's not just eating less and moving more. The calories in are only coming from our foods and our beverages. They're not like sneaking into our body overnight while we're sleeping. What we're eating, what we're drinking, that's where we're getting calories in. Calories out is a little bit more complex. The majority is our metabolism. So it's known as our resting metabolic rate or RMR. Just that number alone is varied based on so many different individual factors. Your height, your weight, your gender, past dieting experiences, how much muscle mass you have. So, but just know that regardless, the resting metabolic rate is the majority of your calories out. And at any given point, you don't have that much control over it. You can slow it down by dieting. You can increase it by building muscle, but we don't have that much control over resting metabolic rate. Activities of daily living is another kind of calories out or calorie expenditure. So that's just like how we go about living our lives. Are we running errands on foot, or are we like ordering groceries on a phone? You know, how active versus sedentary are we in our everyday lives? Then there's the thermic effect of food. So some food, you know, some calories are burned just digesting and absorbing our meals, with protein being the research just like the highest kind of energy expenditure compared to fat and carbs to break down. And then our running and our other exercise. So usually people think of calories out and they just think of exercise, but that's just one little piece, right? Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit more insight as to why calories in, calories out isn't quite as simple as it sounds, because there's all these different factors. Okay, so assuming that, you know, maybe you're coming into this presentation, you're thinking about like, well, I do want to lose some weight. I think that I'll be faster and running will feel easier if I have less excess body fat. And to a certain extent, there's some truth to that, but I'm telling you, it's a point of diminishing returns. So the nutrition approaches that we're going to take to optimize our training, it's not always going to be compatible with the pursuit of weight loss, because as you can see, in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. If you're not taking in enough calories or energy to support your training, you might end up compromising your training. So you might be feeling fatigued. You might not like perform as well. You might not recover as well. You might develop some nutrient deficiencies. You might increase your risk for injury. So you definitely want to be careful about like just how aggressive you want to be about that energy deficit, and you know, making sure that you're not being too aggressive about it to the point where it compromises the energy that you need to optimize your training. Like, what's your goal? What's the most important priority for you? And if weight loss is very high on your list, you know, go about it carefully. Probably work one-on-one with a registered dietitian so that we make sure that you're only in kind of a modest calorie deficit, you're fueling appropriately around your runs, you're getting all the micronutrients you need. But I would definitely say consider your goals carefully. Like, you know, following the structured training plan, really fueling smartly around your runs, hydrating, prioritizing rest, prioritizing recovery. These factors are going to be far more impactful on your performance than losing those last 5 pounds. Not to say that the weight loss won't impact it at all, but again, think about, really prioritize what's most important to you. Okay. And again, I highly recommend working one-on-one with a sports dietitian if you're trying to do both at the same time, because it is doable, but it's got to be done carefully. And then in our final section, I just wanted to mention a few other nutrition considerations for runners and athletes. The first is antioxidants. So basically, antioxidants are plant compounds that protect our cells from free radical damage. And as runners, we as athletes, we actually need more antioxidants in our diet than our sedentary friends, because exercise exacerbates that free radical formation. And of course, so just metabolism, environmental exposure will also, that'll happen anyway, but we definitely need higher levels of antioxidants. And the best way to get them is through a balanced diet. So it all circles back. Maybe there's a role for supplements in certain cases, but supplement industry is unregulated. And honestly, there are so many excellent sources of food sources that we can easily incorporate into our diets. So vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and zinc are 4 of the main antioxidants, and there's lots of foods. If we eat these foods regularly, we're going to get the antioxidants we need. And as you can see from this list, they're very nutritious foods. So it's like if we take a pill that's just vitamin C, all we're getting is vitamin C, which, yes, is an antioxidant. But first of all, the pill might have more or less than we think it does because it's unregulated. It could be more than we need. It's a water-soluble vitamin, so we absorb what we need and pee out the rest. So it could just be very expensive pee there. And overdosing on vitamin C from a pill can lead to GI distress. You're not going to overdose on it if you get it from food. Plus, look at all the other nutrients you're probably getting when you eat citrus fruits, when you have grapefruit, when you have oranges, when you have bell peppers, when you have strawberries, tomatoes, broccoli, cantaloupe, cauliflower, kale, kiwi, papaya, yeah, we're getting vitamin C, but we're also getting vitamin A. We're also getting vitamin K. We're also getting folate. We're also getting potassium, magnesium. We're also getting dietary fiber, right? So definitely recommend a food first approach. And that's going to be the case for all of our antioxidants here. I don't think really runners need to take a pill form of any of these. So 2 more micronutrients just to spotlight. One is calcium, and I mentioned earlier on that depending on the kind of diet you follow, there might be a few micronutrients that are going to be a little harder to get. Calcium is a really important mineral for building and maintaining strong bones. And as runners, especially as we get older, we need to make sure we keep our bone density strong. It's only diminishing with age, and we don't want to develop stress fractures. So the recommendation is 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams per day of calcium, depending on your age. Consuming it with vitamin D enhances absorption. As far as food sources, dairy really is like the best as far as the amount of calcium and how bioavailable it is. So if you can incorporate some milk, yogurt, and cheese a few times a day, that'd be my recommendation. But it is found in plant sources. So like your dark leafy greens, beans, tofu, some nuts, fish with bones like sardines, and then your fortified non-dairy alternatives. So if you're doing soy milk, almond milk, you're often going to see it's fortified with calcium. But if you don't consume any dairy products and you don't think you're eating enough of these foods on this list, maybe you want to do a calcium supplement. And then finally, iron. So iron is a mineral that is used to form red blood cells. Red blood cells transfer oxygen all around our body. So when we're running and we need oxygen, we definitely want to make sure we have well-formed red blood cells. You may be familiar with the term anemia, iron deficiency anemia. So basically when we don't have enough iron in our diets, and then we can experience fatigue, will definitely impair endurance and performance. Females have higher needs than males since we're losing blood every month. 18 milligrams of iron per day for females, 8 milligrams per day of iron for males. And runners often have higher needs. There's something that happens while the pounding that the red blood cells actually break. So you definitely want to make sure you stay on top of, eating enough iron-rich foods. There's 2 types of iron, heme and non-heme. The heme form that's found in animal foods is better absorbed, frankly, to meat, fish, seafood, and poultry. The non-heme form that's found in plants, including beans, peas and lentils, tofu, dark leafy greens, whole grain bread and other grains, but also enriched. A lot of times your bread products can be enriched with iron. Breakfast cereals, sometimes you can get almost 100% of your iron needs in fortified breakfast cereals. And then there's some in nuts and seeds. And then for your plant iron, you're going to absorb it better if you pair it with vitamin C. So for example, if you're having your spinach salad, you might want to toss on some oranges or some strawberries or some tomatoes for vitamin C. You're going to absorb the iron from that spinach better. All right, so we made it to our final slide. The takeaway, what I hope you, if you're still with me, what I hope that you take away from tonight's presentation. So nutrition is a powerful tool in your training success and your overall health. And interestingly, sometimes the nutrition guidelines for health and nutrition guidelines specifically around running are conflict, so especially around sugar and sodium. To optimize your energy, your performance, and your recovery, one of the most important things you can do is plan to eat balanced meals regularly throughout the day that include all 3 of our macronutrients. So not trying to restrict one or the other. Complex carbs for energy, lean protein for satiety and muscles, and then healthy fats for satiety and nutrient absorption. Looking at your schedule, timing your meals and snacks throughout the day so that you stay energized, you stay satisfied, you perform well. Really focusing on how you're feeling before, during, and after exercise. You don't want to go into those runs totally fasted and famished. You also don't want to go into those runs really full, right? Having just had a bean burrito. Prioritize hydration both in daily life and during your workouts. And then really, I would say, moving away from that diet mentality and really focusing on the foods that help you feel good, promote overall health, really thinking about a dietary pattern that you can sustain. Thank you for sticking with me tonight, despite all the technical difficulties at the start. I hope this was helpful, practical, inspiring for those of you who are still on the call. And if you do want more one-on-one support, I do individual counseling, both virtually and in person for those of you here in Georgia. And you can check out my website or shoot me an email.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Alissa. We appreciate that.
Still have a
And-
lot of people on the call. I didn't lose too many.
I know there's still 42 people. It was amazing. And I still learned things. And I would just like to state for the record that Facebook changed their permissions and it kicked everyone off all of the pages that you could broadcast to. And after 50 minutes, we figured it out. And I don't feel so bad because marketing all went on there and they were not able to broadcast either except to their personal pages. So it was not me.
No, I
Facebook changing
totally
permissions.
don't.
So
I had a day I was doing a corporate presentation and my internet was not working and I had to like do it from my phone. Like these things happen. We all understand.
yeah, but this is the second time I was supposed to broadcast to the main page and it didn't happen. So now it's great.
I
But
don't think
tonight was not my fault
no, not your fault. Definitely not your fault.
because I could do it last week and did it easily last week, not today. Anybody have any questions for Alissa? This was all great stuff. And as she said, practice, 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 and you will become an expert in what you are able to do.
Absolutely. And what flavors you like.
Yes.
And when you find them,
I will warn you
Yes.
though, you might have a favorite flavor and then you will have a stomach issue and you'll throw it up and you'll never want it again and you'll have to find a new one.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes.
yeah, sometimes sorry.
I have a few questions if you don't mind.
I mean, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. Yeah, if they're very specific, I would honestly prefer if you email me, but I'll stay on for a few more minutes.
Basically, so I had asked before this started, I didn't know what exactly this was going to be. So these slides, they're going to be posted where? On, are they going to be sent out or on Facebook or what?
I'll send them to you, Amy and Eric.
Yeah, so we'll post it on Facebook. I'll post it in Final Surge and I'll send it in an email. And we also put a link to them in your newsletter. So you have about 4 to 5 options to find it.
Perfect. Thank you. Great presentation. Quick question. What's better, a salad with nothing, with no dressing, or a salad with olive oil?
So better meaning what? What's the goal?
I guess the goal is to not add oil thinking oil that is bad for you. Is oil better for you or is oil not better for you?
So the reason I asked that, I'm pushing you a little bit, is because I think the good versus bad mentality around food is not that helpful. It's such a more nuanced kind of, nutrition is so much more nuanced than that. So I guess I'm thinking about a salad being part of a meal, right? And so we talked about, we want to have vegetables, we want to have protein, we want to have fat, we want to have carbs. The salad would be the vegetable component, and then the oil would be the fat. If there's another source of fat in your meal, maybe you have nuts on the salad, maybe you have avocado in the salad, you can skip the oil, you could just use vinegar, but I would make sure there's some sort of fat in that meal for sure. I think most people enjoy salad more with a little bit of olive oil. And as far as dietary fat goes, it is one of the more heart healthy options because the fat that's contained in it is unsaturated.
Okay. Thank you.
Great questions. Anyone else? And she put her information up here, so you'll be able to ask those questions. And I'm so excited that enough people are staying on here and getting all this information because it is truly valuable for not only in training for Peachtree, but if we race enable you and you go up to the next distance and the next distance, or you just come back and do another 10K program.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if you don't eat within the hour time frame, what happens? How will you feel?
That's such a good question. I feel like somebody always asks you that. it's not going to be like you're going to probably notice a huge difference. Over time, it's just a matter of like, how are you optimizing recovery or you're not? Like over time, if you consistently don't refuel after exercise, your muscles are just not like repairing themselves as well. You could start feeling like if you're not giving yourself carbs right in that window, you're just going to feel sort of like low energy and maybe not have a lot of focus when you go back to work. A lot of times people experience a lot of hunger later in the day if they don't refuel in that window. But yeah, it's not just in that window. Like really, like recovery nutrition that happens like in the 24 hours after your workout, not just in that 1 hour. Just like this window where you have the opportunity to better, like your body is primed to better absorb the nutrition that you give it in that window than if you delay it. So yeah, you'll just better support like all the work that you put into that workout. You're breaking down your muscles, you're burning through your glycogen. You want to, give your body what it needs right back.
Okay, thank you.
Don't beat yourself up if it ends up being like 90 minutes afterwards. Like, not all is not lost. Just do your best to kind of like get in a meal or snack, as soon as possible. All my guidelines are like best case scenario. They're definitely not like, if you don't follow these, you're not gonna finish Peachtree. I promise. It's definitely more about like your consistent habits and just kind of giving you guys the information and the tools, and then you do it with you will, like even if you just try to make like one change, like it's not like overhauling all your nutrition habits over time, like overnight. It's maybe like, well, like let me work on getting like one more serving of vegetables per day. Let me make sure I have a protein source, at breakfast. Let me make sure I'm drinking, a full water bottle before lunch. Like pick one change and start there.
I like that the best. One change, just one change.
One change at a time.
Yep. Too many and you just fall off the wagon.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, I think that's great. Thanks, everyone. We will do this again next week. And now that I have changed all of my permissions on Facebook, I will be able to broadcast again. Thanks for sticking with us tonight, guys. I really appreciate it. Alissa, thank you as always. We enjoyed it, and we will see you again next time.
My pleasure. There's no topic or group of people I'd rather speak with on a Tuesday night. Good night, everyone, and I hope to see you at some run soon.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Night.
Bye.
Thank you so much.